big group today, which is good. So I am Brian Klontz, president of Charitable Solutions. With me is my partner Ryan Raffin. We're going to fully tag team this, I think, at least virtually, as we go through. So Ryan's going to be talking about the crypto donation part of the title, and I will be talking about the appraisal part of the title. And I think it's more than 52% improved, but we will see, as we've been doing a lot of these. Actually, both of these really launched 60 days ago, roughly 75 days ago. So when we say new, it's pretty new. So we've been able to have a lot of reps on both the donation side, which obviously we'll be covering too, the appraisal side, and some nits and nats that we will highlight as we go. So as many of you know, we do not send out the slides directly. We will be doing that indirectly through our video recording. You also may know that as part of the Charitable Solutions LLC.com resources webinar library, so that's sort of the path there. We now have, I think this, I should have counted, I think this may be our 50th one. It's got to be close. And so we now have that on a YouTube platform. So it should be much, much easier to navigate and, jump around. That's what I do on these sort of videos too, when I'm sort of looking for a specific piece of information. So in any event, that will come out next week per usual. Also, if you don't mind, any Q&A, so I will guess that I will be doing some of the Q&A when Ryan is doing his donation part, and he will probably be doing some, and will punt the hard ones to me on the appraisal part. But if you can do the Q&A, I think we even have chat now suppressed, or I don't know, minimized. So I think it's only Q&A, but we certainly encourage interaction, questions you have, obviously around content. Or sort of beyond, but in this case, really just specific to crypto itself. So with that, let me jump in. I'll do a very quick sort of overview of all the other odd things that we do. I still have the 20th anniversary logo. I created the firm January 15th of 2003, so we have just crossed our 22nd anniversary. So I either need to drop the logo, which I probably will this year, and then sort of wait for the 25th or something. I guess that's what we do. But our mission since day one is to help make charitable gifts happen that otherwise wouldn't. And so if there's some kind of risk or quick turnaround or holding period issue that other charities are not comfortable taking on a particular asset like crypto, we have created multiple charitable entities and multiple service structures to be able to help facilitate these gifts so that they actually can happen, sort of be that bridge or that lubricant to sort of make these gifts occur. So top right, I'll again go through this one quickly because it's not what many people think of us as, but we do a lot around the Emergency Assistance Fund administration. So I created a charity in 2009 that does nothing but disaster relief. We are doing massive number of grants right now into California for obvious reasons. We actually do this globally, and so about a third of our grants are to individuals who have been impacted by disasters or personal hardships, typically that are employees of large employer groups. You can see I've got 350 funds. We've got about 420 now. I need to keep up, and we're at about 14 million employees that we cover. We have a team of about 130 people on that side doing just those grants. Professional advisor workshop, donor workshop board. I'm flying down to a community foundation tomorrow to work with their board. So do maybe about 60 to 80 of these a year, both virtually and in person. Ryan does some, Paul on our team does a fair amount. John on our team does a lot too, and others. And so we do both CE and, again, nonprofit donor speeches really in this particular area. Broader based sort of charitable planning. Paul, for example, is doing a ton on AI for obvious reasons, but similar to what we're doing today, really try to have that as a very intentional service line. I'll go to charitable gift annuity risk management, sort of that middle top. So we have an actuary on staff, have since day one, do a lot of actuarial risk assessments of CGA pools, both for new startups, but primarily for large existing pools, usually 10 million or more in assets, and in particular for any very large concentrated risk or risky sort of generally gift annuity within the pool or one that is being proposed. So that is our particular specialty of sort of analyzing those to sort of see, does it work? How can you use some strategies or tactics to be able to minimize that risk and still be able to, again, receive that donation. Charitable appraisals, so we're going to talk about that today. So cryptocurrency, which Ryan has very appropriately highlighted. We do have a team of appraisers. So Russ on our team does life income termination or assignment donations. I do life insurance and cryptocurrency. We have 2 people doing just business appraisals. Precious metals is another person, tangible property, another person. So our sort of tagline is, if you can give it to charity, we can accept it. I think on one of the past webinars, I said somebody tried to give a horse to a hippo assisted therapy program. We did not do the horse, and we also do not do local real estate, but anything else for any kind of charitable purposes, we do those. And obviously we'll be talking about crypto more specifically. Jumping back to Gift Annuity Foundation, big announcement. So I need to do a whole webinar just on this. We have just crossed, I think like 3 weeks ago, our 1,000th gift annuity within the pool. So we've actually done many more than that, but some have matured. And then we make that grant out. Bottom line is we're in all 50 states, as you see there. We are an aggregator and a risk manager. We have, again, over 1,000 contracts, about 85 million in assets, and 100% of these gift annuities must be granted out at the end, and 100% of the actual residuum is granted out to an individual or multiple charities. So the bottom line is, rather than having, we have roughly 350 charities that have referred in a specific gift annuity that has completed, rather than those 350 charities having separate and distinct pools or having to register, which is a huge pain in the butt in New York and California and Hawaii. We have, for some weird reason, sort of run right into that storm and registered in all the places, such that those charities don't have to turn down again or decline those gifts from great donors. Similarly, our non-cash asset management area, Decamai Foundation, Decamai Asset Trust. We don't have our numbers yet for this year. We'll talk about them very briefly in a minute. But our primary role is where in any kind of non-cash or illiquid, usually large dollar or value asset is being offered to a charity, and that charity, for whatever reason, again, is not comfortable taking that in, tax risk, legal risk, maybe it's an international property, tenant issues, who knows what. We can take easy ones too, don't get me wrong. But any of those that are more complex or super quick turnaround time, or again, a very long hold period, anything that doesn't meet their gift acceptance, rather than saying no, good donor, good asset, wanting to do good things, they can say, wait a minute, there's this super weird niche-based charity called the Decamai Foundation. Who would have thunk it? That's all they do. You can't make it up. And so since day one, we've been this aggregator risk manager through structure and team to be the ones that are taking in the illiquid or complex gifts, same as the National Gift Annuity Foundation. Once it's sold, nothing stays with us liquid. So we only take in illiquid. Once liquid, it's then being granted out. And you can see there we're over $4 billion of actual value completed. Actually, I need to update that too. That's probably closer to 5 now. And you can see the average gift in the last couple of years has been about 5.2 million. We do roughly one of those per day. And so then we're able to process that through. The average is between about 1.2 and 1.4%, meaning roughly 99 cents on the dollar is then granted as a cash liquid grant out. The final point that I would make, and I think Ryan's going to mention this too in one of his bullet points, is there are some donors, including crypto and others, that actually by design either want to have the asset held longer term and or for us to do direct investments into typically illiquid forms, whether that's private equity funds or direct VC type investment or real estate. So it's roughly a third of our overall assets are in donor advised funds with these direct investments from donors who are very likely sort of already in that space or lane anyway, and they're trying to maximize their charitable asset growth, all things being equal. So jumping now to the sort of the numbers, I won't go through this too much because we don't have them yet for 2024. Again, Ryan sort of highlighted that piece too. But one thing I would highlight here is that cryptocurrency, I continue to say the last 2 or 3 years, because I am omniscient and I have a crystal ball and I'm always accurate. And I continue to say it's always 1% of what we take in. It's, no matter what, if the market's up, it's down, it's 1%. Focus on private business interests. still focus on private business interests, still focus on real estate, still our larger asset classes by far. But you will hear, I will not take Ryan's thunder, the crazy crypto volume, in particular in the last quarter of last year, has now completely screwed up my advice of saying, don't worry about crypto. Yes, it's the shiny thing everybody wants to talk about, but not many of these transactions are happening, at least more broadly. That kind of changed, when Bitcoin hit the 100,000 and continues miraculously to be over 100,000 now. Usually, by the way, whenever we do these types of presentations, whatever asset class we're going to talk about in 30 days will have a precipitous 20 to 30% drop in value. It's just, you can't make it up. So strangely, I guess, or fortuitously, Bitcoin and other crypto assets continue, obviously, to either maintain or continue to appreciate. So with that, I'll pass it over to Ryan to go through our agenda, and I'll jump back in for the appraisal piece. So Ryan?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So I just quickly running through the agenda here. I'm going to talk about the donation opportunities that we've seen in light of what Brian just alluded to, more 2024 activity and frankly, the challenges. Then I'll pass it off to Brian. He'll talk about the same from the appraisal standpoint. A brief discussion of what some gift planning options are. Then I will go through a quick demo of kind of what our new process looks like. And then Brian will do the same for the appraisal process. So in some ways, this is actually very different from our normal webinars where we're just kind of talking through ideas and questions and case studies. Here we're actually going into a lot more depth on our actual process than we often do on these webinars. So I guess this will be a little unique in that regard, but I think all for the better. I think it'll be helpful to have this as an explanation of sort of how we're working through the current crypto landscape, and how we are actually and literally working through these donations and appraisal opportunities. So with that said, what did we see last year? There was really significant activity throughout 2024, really from about this time last January when the first Bitcoin ETF was approved by the SEC. That continued throughout the year, as you might guess by the fact that if you're watching these webinars, we were kind of consistently saying, yeah, seeing a lot of crypto. And we had a crypto webinar in April saying, hey, it looks like it's really back this time. And that really kicked into overdrive after the election with the view that the incoming administration would be friendly to crypto overall, and with a perception that there would be a change in leadership at the SEC, which has, of course, happened. So really towards the end of 2024, we started to see a big uptick from what had already been a very crypto-heavy year. And although we don't have our final 2024 donation activity numbers at Decami yet, I do have the 2024 crypto numbers where you can see 74 donations, by far an all-time record for us. Significant increase, roughly a 5-fold increase in number of donations from 2023, over $100 million in crypto. So that's going to be significantly more than 1% of our donation value. Did see a number of quite large donations. We had 4 of them that were 8-figure gifts. But on the flip side, the smallest was under $14,000. So a really broad range of activity in terms of donations, with some many orders of magnitude larger than the very smallest one. Historically, how does this compare to what we've seen historically? What we've always seen has been about a $600,000 to $700,000 average crypto gift size, a little bit smaller than what we do otherwise on the non-cash side. And our fee kind of reflected that. I think it's important to say what our existing fee structure is. Historically, we were charging $3,500 to $4,500 flat for most crypto donations. And that tended to work really well because at a 600,000, 700,000 average gift size, that's well under 1% on value. Most donors were pretty comfortable with that kind of flat dollar fee paid out of the sale proceeds after the donation and sale. And so that was pretty comfortable for most of our donors historically. What kind of crypto were we seeing? Like most people, and this is true historically, true last year, Bitcoin, Ethereum, big players in the space. Solana has had a huge run up in the last couple of years, particularly in 2024. So we did see a lot of Solana activity, and then many other altcoins as well. So definitely seeing broad ranging crypto activity. And really seeing that explode in a way that was starting to become, frankly, a little bit challenging at the end of the year. So what were we seeing as we reflected on the feedback we were getting, as we were reflecting on our experience getting these crypto donation inquiries? What were we hearing from our charitable partners and from donors and from advisors? We were hearing that these smaller gifts, well under that $600,000, $700,000 level, was a bit of a sticking point, really, for everyone. The problem there was kind of twofold. For donors, that pricing, $3,500, $4,500 flat, once you get to 200,000 and below, that pricing starts to become kind of prohibitive. As much as that looks good at the 600K plus level, 200,000 below that pricing, the fixed fees is not so good. But on our side, and this was part of the problem, the staff time for us was pretty comparable for the lower dollar value gifts as the higher dollar value gifts. So we were getting this feedback from charitable partners saying, that the fee is just, difficult for these donors, and wondering, because we were getting so many more inquiries, including at the lower dollar values, what could we do to provide a solution for these donors and help out the charities that they're partnering with. So with that in mind, we needed a way to figure out how we could streamline our process and bring down the staff time, which would then allow us to bring down our pricing. And to be clear, it was really the staff time that was killing us, because when we do these donations, typically it was starting off with some kind of email introduction, and then we would set up a call, usually with the charity or financial advisor. And then there would be another call after that with the donor. And then there would be more emails. And so that front end planning was really taking up a lot of time, which we didn't have at year end anyways, and which was challenging when we were talking about donations that were maybe $100,000, sometimes less, for crypto. So we really put a lot of time into this right before the holidays as an organization, trying to figure out what we could do to reduce that front end planning time and discussion. So with that said, I'll kind of revisit our solution in a few slides, and I think Brian's going to take over now to talk about similar stuff from the appraisal side, and I have to get ready to launch a poll. So
let's see if you can do the poll. This is like the technology stuff when you're trying to, have a 3 or 4 way call here and you're trying to patch different people in. The level of difficulty has just gone way up for Ryan, so hopefully we can see him sweat on the recording here a little bit. But I would say a couple things. One, so very, very important to understand, for any that we take in, I cannot be the appraiser. Automatically disqualifies me or anybody else on our team as the appraiser, because we're a party to the transaction. So all of the appraisals that I do are not obviously coming through Decami. They're going to other charities. So I'm able to see the different types of tokens, the different types of charities, and so on. And so you can see the first bullet point, fun quiz. I get this question directly or indirectly about 3 to 4 times a day. Seriously, why am I having to do this? You get donors who get very frustrated. A lot of donors are not actually complying with the substantiation requirement. That is crystal clear in triplicate over multiple years from the IRS deeming crypto as property, therefore requiring a qualified appraisal. Donors try to be logical. You cannot be logical in many ways with the Internal Revenue Code, but I'm going to point out a lot of reasons why at the end of this, you're going to be like, I had no idea the different dimensions and facets to this. So the point is that many donors will say, I made the donation on Tuesday. I see it time stamped 1:12 in the afternoon. They sold it at 1:13. I got $100,000. That's my deduction. I'm sticking that on the 8283 and I'm moving forward. I'm not doing a stupid appraisal. That is very much the majority opinion. So you can see that there. So we're going to launch a poll by saying Ryan's going to launch a poll. So let's see if Ryan can do it. So I've got a 5-question poll. So first one, so agree or disagree. IRS appraisal requirement is ridiculous, and this is anonymous. You can say put that on we want. These are totally liquid tokens, just like public stock, and you see the exact amount the charity receives as proceeds. So go ahead and sort of do that first one. And there's some other ones that are going to get much, much more complicated. So we'll just give you like a little 15 seconds on that one. Shouldn't overthink it, but good. Interesting. Interesting. Ooh, jockeying back and forth. Okay. And I don't think they can see that, Ryan. They can't see the jockeying, right? Only we can see the jockeying in terms of what the actual amounts are.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not sure they can see the live results. I'm surprised how many people think that the IRS is reasonable.
I know, well, that's actually true. So, and we'll obviously post this, so you'll see it. So the next one requires a little bit more context. You guys have already responded totally fine. You can see their California donor submits a completed transfer request on Friday, January 19th. And I went back and looked at the calendar. That was a Friday for 1 Bitcoin. It transfers from the donor's account, bit of a delay. The next day, Saturday, 11 p.m. donor's time. So the donor sees it go out of the in essence, his wallet at that point. It is received instantly by a Massachusetts charity, but that's on at that point on the weekend. They come in on Monday and they sell. What's the donation date? So we have obviously the 19th, the 20th, the 21st, and the 22nd. So again, we'll go through this in a moment too. So looks like you guys have already, you didn't need me to read it. You already answered it. That's okay. So now we have, you can see here, the same donor. Now we get into like what the deductibility is. Same donor, cost basis 10,000. The token sold Monday. So we know it sold. The charity came in, Massachusetts charity sold it on Monday for exactly $50,000. The high was $50,000 for that day. The low was $40,000. They sold it for 50. What's the deduction? Then this is actually sort of, I think this is multiple responses. It is. You can do multiple responses here. You can see there the donor runs a mining operation. CPA said the sales proceeds received would be ordinary income, active trader business. So the deduction is basis. Is that right or wrong? So again, each one of these are sort of right or wrong. Since it's non-related use property or unrelated use, lesser of fair market value or basis, so 10. It's a capital gain asset. The deduction is the sales price or fair market value, whatever is greater. Asset wasn't legally donated on Monday. It was actually Sunday Eastern. So this sort of goes to the prior question. And that's what the charity actually has to receipt. Now you have an issue of time zones, right? So you got Pacific time where the donor is, Eastern Standard Time where the charity is. And you were probably, I know what you're thinking all right now. You're thinking, you're just doing this to be complex. Ryan and I are dealing, and Ryan more specifically, with this exact situation, not January 19th. You make it December 31st. And there was a lag on when they actually would approve the delivery of the tokens over to us. So this happens a lot more than you would think. So you can see that sort of deal. Now we have another scenario. What if the same donor acquires the Bitcoin 9 months prior to the donation? Deduction will be lesser of fair market value or basis, so 10,000. If the charity can show the exact proceeds from the sale, it should just simply be what the exact gross proceeds are. So that's the third one. You can see this gets, I hope you're all going, wait a minute, I didn't know about all these moving parts. We can go on for a while with this, by the way. And now let's imagine you're the appraiser. So now this donor calls you and said, I'd like this to be appraised. A Bitcoin super liquid. Maybe it's too liquid. Sold on 250 exchanges. 250. I think I lost this somewhere. Maybe I didn't. I don't know. Amazon is sold on one exchange, NASDAQ. That's it. Bitcoin, 250 exchanges. What would you choose? Which exchange? Is it the donors exchange, the charities exchange, top three exchanges that have the highest verifiable prices? A lot of this is subjective. So I want to be really clear in the current sort of tax guidance. It's murky. It's basically, that's what the appraiser should decide. It's like, well, what does that mean? It's like, so there's a lot of subjectivity to this, as you'll see. And then I just did one of these Friday. Same donor wants to give the charity a different token, not giving them Bitcoin, totally different token, PulseX. So I had a question that already came through. Do you accept any and all? This is on the exception donation side. We're talking about the appraisal side. You can see there are roughly 15,000 different tokens. So when people hear crypto, it's Bitcoin. It's Bitcoin and 14,999 more tokens. So now you have to think about this from an appraisal framework of it's not just super liquid all the time Bitcoin on 250 exchanges. This particular one that I was asked to do, 8 billion, 8 billion tokens of PulseX worth about $90,000. But you can see there, I had to determine, how would you actually go about that? No centralized exchange does it trade on, only a decentralized network, about 1 billion tokens a day. Well, this was 8 billion, totally different. Take about 8 to 10 days to liquidate. You see the rest of this, thinly traded tokens, some of which these weren't, but some of which can be restricted tokens. That's a whole other layer to this that nobody ever seems to think about, understandably. Blockage discounts and so on. Or you'd say, look, there are direct trades on the network, and there are. It was for the billion. I can't see the other trade, so I can't figure out the high and the low, but I can see that specific direct, in essence, on-chain trade. So maybe with that, I can use the donation date, but that's one date, but there are multiple sales because you can't sell through as soon as it's received like you can with Bitcoin. So I think you're getting the point. I won't drone on. I hope it's helpful in sort of the complexity of this. And a lot of these don't have right answers. You think they do, they don't. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. So I think now we can sort of look at this. So the first thing is, this is very interesting too, and totally fine to think this. So IRS appraisal requirement is ridiculous. 43% agree. So roughly half of everybody on here. So that's pretty good. The fact that 60% roughly disagree. This one is interesting. Somebody went back and changed their answer, by the way, because you didn't have the 121 before. So in this case, it's the donor, California donor, 119. The transfer actually occurs. Now this gets murky, even for the donor that we're working with. The CPA is basically may take the position to say, look, we relinquished sort of all control. The fact it got jammed up at the at the exchange, that's not our issue. We sort of gave all authority and sort of formal approval to make the donation. They just, for whatever reason, wanted to sort of get it additional authorization, additional approval, or whatever. So basically, the holdup was at their side. So in some of this is creating sort of internal discussions, which are interesting. But generally speaking, from the charities standpoint, they received it on Saturday. Because in this case, actually, I'm sorry, they received it on Sunday. The donor sent it 11 p.m. Eastern time, 11 p.m. Pacific time on Saturday. The charity then would have received it on Sunday morning. So the charity's receipt would have said Sunday. So that's a whole other issue on the 21st. So you can see how this gets weird. We got cost basis. Donor runs a mining operation. Deemed active trade, deduction is basis at 10,000. That we're not giving any tax or legal advice. You saw the disclaimer on the agenda. check with your own tax counsel. Generally, this is probably correct. So if you've got actually an active trade or business, otherwise deemed ordinary income in the hands of the donor, now you have ordinary income reduction rules, which basically take that down to basis. Non-related use property doesn't apply here. So this would not apply because it's not tangible personal property. It is intangible property. Therefore, that would not apply. Since this is capital gain asset, deduction is the sales price or fair market value, whatever is greater. Technically, it would be the fair market value based on the appraisal, would not have anything to do with the sales price. Generally speaking, because again, if it's Amazon stock, if you take that same methodology, some don't. If you did, what the charity sells Amazon for at 1:13 in the afternoon is pretty much immaterial about what the actual deduction is. The deduction, of course, for Amazon stock is the mean for the high and the low for the day of the trade on one exchange on one fixed day, not 24-hour days that are shifting by time zone on 250 different exchanges. Completely different. So that one, in my view, would be incorrect. Some may argue otherwise, which would be fine. Wasn't legally donated on Monday. It was actually Sunday, 2 a.m. So the deduction will be the fair market value as of Sunday, taking the average of the high and low on the exchange. Generally speaking, I would say that's maybe right. That would, though, then make the assumption that it was only on the exchange, maybe the charity's exchange versus the donor's exchange. So then that's different. That's actually not how I do it, but if the donor acquired, and this has come up a lot, this has come up a lot in the last month. If the donors acquired Bitcoin 9 months prior to the donation would be the lesser of fair market value or basis. That's actually the case. It would be the lesser because it's short-term capital gain, not long-term gain, short-term gain. And so with the huge run-up of crypto, people are like, oh my God, I've got a ton of gain. I'm going to give it in December. I bought it in March. That is a gigantic problem because if I do the full appraisal, I'm not telling them what to take as a deduction. That goes back to their CPA. And then they email me upset saying, oh my God, I can't even take the full fair market value deduction. I'm like, right, it's not long-term capital gain. That's for you and your CPA to determine what the deduction is. So be very careful about that when you have this kind of sort of exponential run up. The charity can show exact charitable proceeds, simply be the 50,000. Again, that's what donors, I think, rationally think. I don't see how that would work since no other asset ever given to charity has the same thing in terms of the approach. But again, that can become subjective. Here's the appraiser's choice piece. Bitcoin's liquid, 250 exchanges. Some would say the donor's exchange, charity's exchange. What really Ryan sort of developed a lot of this appraisal methodology very early on, whatever that was, 6 years ago, 5 years ago, a long time ago. But top 3 exchanges by volume for that particular token that settles in dollars. Most of the ones that have much higher valuation are ones in the basically South Asia, much more thinly traded, and then have very low, again, obviously low volume because they're thinly traded, and much more volatility. So if you wanted to game it, which you could, even with Bitcoin, you could game it by picking those exchanges with the highest basically volatility or high and low, which the highest mean, and then you select those almost as a reverse engineering to get the highest deduction. So it can be sort of gamed here too. And final point here is this PulseX thinly traded tokens may require additional valuation discount. So I just did this and I did apply an additional discount for exactly that reason. That's quite subjective as well, but sort of made the notation sort of what the approach would be and sort of reasonable ranges for discounts. I took the highest range to be as conservative as possible. And then direct trades. This was very tricky. This was very tricky. So I basically included an additional discount for the blockage component because we weren't able, or the charity wasn't able to sell through that entire point. So I just want to, I hope this is helpful to let you see the complexity of the valuation, and it's not all Bitcoin. You think it is, it's not. So I think, Ryan, correct me, I think roughly a third of all the donations that we've received were not Bitcoin. So a lot were, but a lot were, 2/3 weren't Bitcoin. So, you've got Ethereum, which is very, heavy volume, very liquid. Solana, as Ryan mentioned, but a whole lot of other ones of the 15,000 tokens have been donated to. So with that, I'll maybe just jump right back in. I'm going to move this along, I promise. But first, I've been qualified appraiser since 2015. You can see there's 0 as in 0 appraisals completed from 2015 to the end of 17. And the big issue for me, and Ryan actually wrote an article in October 2014 just on this issue of, well, if it's deemed property based on the October 2014 pronouncement, then wait a minute, there must be a requirement for a qualified appraisal that would seem to sort of follow. And then you look at the qualified appraiser rules, have a master's degree in the asset being contributed, or a appraisal designation from a nationally recognized body for the specific asset. Those don't exist at all. So then it became, well, wait a minute, if it's requiring an appraisal and there are no appraisers, then literally none of these donations could be made, like literally. That was weird. So we sort of held ourselves out as like, I guess we can kind of figure it out and do it, because I was already doing life insurance appraisals and sort of intangible properties, somewhat similar, not exactly. And then so basically just took that approach. So anyway, you can see there over 2,000 now have been completed since 2017, and it's over 100 in the last 30 days. So these are coming in like a tidal wave. All of these that were jammed in right at the last 30 to 45 days to other charities, not to us, but to other charities, obviously are all preparing for their either April or obviously October tax filing for 2024. So now they're all scrambling, I would say, to sort of have the appraisals completed to be compliant with that filing. Prior pricing. So we talked a bit about prior pricing for the donations that Ryan talked about. Our prior pricing was $600 for the first appraisal, $350 for each additional appraisal. And again, that's the full appraisal. There's a declaration or attestation that's included, the Form 8283, the receipt, and so on. So it's a lot of questions on they always have questions on the front end, questions for the process. I'll be bad, but the charity didn't get the 8283 securely. They're having trouble getting in. You get the rest of that story. So I would say half of the actual time was doing the appraisal, and half of it was all of the hand holding around sort of the orbit of that appraisal, somewhat painfully. So next slide. So what we sort of changed is we worked a lot on fully automating the actual process through a web form. And so we'll show that here in a couple minutes after Ryan does his piece. But basically, here are the specific questions that we need, all the variables to feed the entire process, the methodology, the pricing, the grids, everything. And then so to be able to, in essence, automate that whole process for both the Word document that is the qualified appraisal, as well as the Form 8283. So we dropped it. The same thing that Ryan was talking about. The smaller ones became very prohibitive. $600 on a $10,000 donation is not good, obviously. And we knew that. The problem was I can't get time down. So can't get time down, can't get pricing down. So dropped it to 150 as long as they use that automated do-it-yourself turnkey process. It's still not quite there, but it's close. And then 75 for each additional appraisal if it's all submitted at the same time through the same form. And then if it's over 500,000, actually increased pricing, because we got a lot more questions on those. And then the full appraisal must be included with the tax return. So much more sort of subject to audit concerns or considerations too. So actually $800 for those for the first, and $400 for each additional one. And this was really a result, exactly what Ryan talked about, is how do we better serve those donors and our charitable partners who are receiving these types of gifts, primarily for those that were less than, let's say, $150,000 donations. And there are a lot of those. So how do you sort of have a better automated system and process to make sure we can get time down? So with that, I think it now goes over to you, Ryan, for the our actual process. Yeah, the gift planning side. Yep.
Yeah, and I think as we're talking through sort of our current processes, it's probably good to talk about more complex plan giving options, particularly the charitable remainder trust, which remains an area of emphasis for Decami, broadly speaking, kind of regardless of asset type. Most of the time when we get approached about a charitable remainder trust, it's usually funding with real estate, which is its own webinar separate and aside from this. But you could certainly do a charitable remainder trust with crypto. And unlike real estate, crypto has the advantage in most cases of having a lot of liquidity. So that actually looks pretty good in a charitable remainder trust context, with a couple important caveats, I think. One being that there is going to be the need for diversification of assets inside the trust. Crypto donors tend to really like crypto. They want to stay in crypto. That's how they've become wealthy. They think it's a good investment, and looks like, at least in their case, they're right. But that's not going to work within a charitable remainder trust because of the trustee's fiduciary obligations to the charitable remainder beneficiary. The remainder beneficiary is not going to want that downside risk of the volatility that comes with crypto. So diversification is going to need to be something that happens, and the donor is going to need to be comfortable with that. And the payout requirements it can be an issue as well. Crypto donors are often on the young side, so you run into some issues there. And I think certainly you would run into that more. I'm talking about a unit trust here. An annuity trust, I think, would be even more challenging with sort of your average crypto donor, often someone in their 40s, or sometimes even younger. Same thing kind of with a gift annuity. You're going to run into issues with age. Gift annuity, of course, a bit more of an off-the-rack solution there. And this just occurred to me a few minutes ago, right before the webinar. You would probably, if you were coming to us with a crypto to fund a gift annuity, you'd probably be dealing with one of our team members for the entire process, which is not normally the case when you're coming to us with a non-cash asset to fund a life income gift. Usually it's a big team involved. If you had crypto to fund a CGA, you're probably dealing with one person, Alex Cedar, the entire time, just based on her expertise. And then finally, kind of our bespoke DAF offerings, custom sale strategies, whether that's looking for selling particular tranches or hitting certain price targets. We can do that inside the donor advised fund. We could work through a market maker. I'm doing that right now with a donor who's making some sizable contributions. So if you want to get creative with how the crypto is sold after it's been donated, you just don't want an immediate sale, which most crypto donors do. We can be creative there. We could also consider a longer term hold. We've got some custody options for securely holding crypto inside the donor advised fund. We don't have that same limitation that a charitable remainder trust would, where there's a kind of a fiduciary requirement to divest. And even something like staking, we can and have done before. So that gets quite complicated and even brings in a kind of unsettled tax treatment and the question about whether staking income is UBTI. The staking tax conversations are very interesting. And if you're interested in that, you can find a lot of discussion about the tax classification of staking income online. So that's kind of what gift planning options are on the more complex side. But circling back to the new sort of donation process for more standard crypto donations, where it's just going to be donated and sold right away, and the cash is going to be granted onward to the charity that made the referral. How did we work to reduce staff time on this? Well, as we discussed it, we realized, as I've already mentioned, that a lot of our time here is on the front end planning, answering questions, getting paperwork sent out, getting crypto deposit details sent out, the so-called wallet addresses or deposit addresses. We realized that there was a way to kind of bundle up all of that information into a single packet. And then if we could do that, we could get that sent out to donors immediately. And that's what we decided to do via DocuSign, is sort of reduce down our paperwork, distill it to the essentials, include answers to all of the most common questions, and that rather than getting on the phone with advisors and charities and then maybe separately donors, we could push that out as soon as we got the inquiry from the charity or the donor or the advisor. So that DocuSign was kind of set up and ready to go. The advantage to doing it that way is, one, it reduces our time, but for donors, they don't really care about that. They don't care how much time we spend on this. We can bring that fee down. And that really matters a lot, as Brian and I have both discussed, for these donations that are on the lower end compared to what we've seen historically, thinking 200,000 and below. is kind of where we were designing this. So where our fee structure kind of landed is rather than having a fixed dollar amount, that flat fee, 3,500 to 4,500, depending on the token, we were going to go to a percentage and just go to a 1% donation or the 1% donation fee with a $500 minimum and a $4,000 maximum. That allows for I think a much more broad range of donations where donors don't feel quite as pinched by the fee. And I think, at least in my experience, since we unveiled this about 60, 75 days ago, as Brian said, we've gotten much better feedback when it comes to the fees. Donors are much more comfortable with this kind of fee structure, even though it does put a little more work on them, as I'll show in a moment, as you'll see when I go through what our forms look like. And what we've kind of landed on is if it's under $500,000, this is really the process, unless there's a case where we have some volume restrictions. It's a very thinly traded token that might require more special handling. That's probably more for the traditional process. Or if it's a very high touch donor, and we kind of get that sense from the charity or the advisor, then maybe it's better off in the traditional process. But generally speaking, under $500,000, we can put it into this new donation process and bring the fee down for donors, so it works better for everyone. So what does this look like for donors? As I said, we're pushing out a DocuSign. The reason I've got this screenshot here is, again, to mention that it is Alex Cedar on our team who is managing this. So she's on the webinar right now, has become very proficient at handling these crypto donations. And so she's the one who is really managing this new process. And when there are donor questions, she's taking care of those and just making sure everything goes smoothly, which it always has with this new process so far to date. What does the form itself look like? If you're familiar at all with Decamai's paperwork, you would know that we have normally a memo of understanding and a donor advised fund agreement that are 3 pages each, so 6 pages total. We worked very hard to get that down to just these 2 pages that you're seeing right now. As you can see, it's still collecting standard donor info, contact info for the primary donor, joint donor, which we use for kind of our own KYC, but also for tax reporting purposes and just for donor communication. So we get that in the DocuSign. We get the recommended charity info, again, just like you would expect with any kind of donor advised fund where donors are making a recommendation. We're getting that up front as soon as we get the inquiry and this DocuSign goes out. And then the donors are also indicating what they're looking to contribute. That drop down there has most of the top coins. The idea being that was going to cover 80, 90% of the inquiries that we got with that list there. They tell us what they're donating. They sign an initial, and then at the bottom of those 2 pages, which I've got highlighted in a red rectangle, I guess, there's a list of deposit addresses there. So once the DocuSign is completed, donors can actually copy and paste that address, and then they'll have the info that they need to actually proceed with the donation itself. I'll show what that looks like in a moment as well. In addition to those forms, the DocuSign also, and you can tell this by the kind of DocuSign watermark at the top of these screenshots, the DocuSign also contains frequently asked questions and policies. These FAQs, we designed these to cover 90% of the questions that we get. So who are we? How does this all work? What can we take? Questions about deductions, appraisals, sale process. All of that's covered here. And I think it really does cover most of the common questions, if not all of them. We also go into depth on our specific crypto and gift acceptance policies, and even have our broad donor advised fund policies as well included here, which I haven't screenshotted. If you really want those, just let me know. I can send them to you. It's an 8-page DocuSign with 2 pages of info that donors need to fill out, and then the rest of it is FAQs and information for donors. And I think we've been so successful with that, at least in terms of the feedback that we've seen so far. It's gone really well and worked well for donors. We're actually considering, okay, should we shift more broadly to using this kind of DocuSign model for other asset types and other donations that are maybe more traditional? So I think that part, although it came at the very end of the year, the very busiest time of year, it's actually gone better than I really did expect as we were working on it. So that's kind of what the paperwork looks like to donors. Process-wise, what do they need to send out? They get that address, like I mentioned, in the paperwork. They copy and paste that. Then they send over a test, and then we get an automatic notification that looks just like this. This was a real donation, as you can probably tell. And that's a very small amount of Ethereum. That's worth, I think at current value, maybe about $45, $50 of Ethereum. That's really all the tests need to be. This is a best practice for any crypto transaction, not just donations, but any kind of crypto transaction. You want to do a test first. So we really do insist on that. Donors have that address that they need to send it to. They send it over. We get this notification is the important part. I get this. Alex gets this. I think Brian does as well. So we know that this test has landed. One thing I did want to mention, and I really should have circled or highlighted this in the screenshot, that time there, crypto trades 24 hours a day. Donors can send it 24 hours a day. That's getting into the evening, 5:45. If Alex was looking out for this, that's 5:45 Mountain Time. Alex is in Cleveland, so that would have been 7:45 her time. Donors send us tests or even main donation amounts. We don't always see them if we don't get a heads up ahead of time. So we try to be very clear with donors. If you send kind of off hours, if you don't give us advance notice, we may not see the test land ahead of time. We may not be able to confirm right away. And the same is really true for the main donation amount, which is, again, what you're seeing here, 12 Ethereum. That was the main donation, about $35,000, $40,000, depending on where Ethereum's trading at. So we're getting that notification when it comes over, again, kind of off hours. So I'm not sure the donor got the confirmation that we'd received it right away. That probably came the next morning. And then we said, hey, we got the crypto. The crypto was sold as soon as someone was available to sell it. And then the donor got their deduction, in this case, based on the value of the gift on January 22nd, just a few days ago there. So a very recent donation that worked through this process successfully. And so with that said, I think Brian has a few minutes here to go through the appraisal process.
Yeah, one thing weren't going to talk about this today. We talked about this a bit more in our other crypto processing webinar. So I'd really encourage you. I think this is our 4th one, sort of on crypto in sort of different areas. But things like, the redundancy of the security key to be able to get access to these wallets. So we've got 3 people on staff, have sort of a general procedure and process around that. Who can sell, general controls there. I think we had to add another $10,000 of just insurance premium because of this crypto activity for our crime policy to sort of extend it to that. So it has a lot more implications than, set up a fun portal through DocuSign that they are able to sort of hop in and, make donations. Again, it's a little bit more holistic in terms of a process, and even opening an institutional account is a whole other conversation that we covered, I think, in depth in the prior one. So in many cases, still, if they're requiring personal identifying information, PII, from all board members or governing, body, I mean, it's a process, to do that. So it gets back to you better have scale to be able to do it, kind of like gift annuities, frankly, or kind of like other non-cash assets, all things being equal. So if you jump to the next slide, Ryan, I'll sort of talk briefly about sort of what our process similar to this. And so if you go on the CharitableSolutionsLLC.com website, we have appraisals, charitable appraisals as sort of the drop down. And this is sort of the landing page. The real key is for them to sort of click through those appraisal instructions. Please read first. Can't make that any clearer. Nobody does it, but please read that first. Anyway, so it goes through again, the FAQs, having done 2,000 of these. I know the questions that come up. So that's sort of in there. It's on one page, so it's not too burdensome. And then if you do click here, you actually start then the online web form appraisal. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see these are all 20 questions. So it's exactly 20 questions. Some of this you may see, some of this you may not, but you able to advance the slide, Ryan, on the next one? Yeah, you're probably in doing Q&A. So here's the actual appraisal form, donor's name, last name, street address. You see the rest of that. So also donor input, then charity input in terms of the charity itself. Donors get very confused with donor advised funds. Very confused. So they always put the name of their fund. That's not the charity, you know, so I put on there, you know, it's the sponsoring donor advised fund as the example. In many cases too, for universities, they, oh, it's this university. Well, actually, it's to the foundation. Totally different. So then that basically I have to do an entirely new appraisal, like literally, because this whole thing is run through this automation. So you've got, again, charity's tax ID and so on. And then the donation information, you know, what is the actual token, the number of units, acquisition date. So again, that gets back to the whole issue, was at least a year or more. This gets tricky too, because which token are they actually donating? Is it the first one they purchased? Maybe they bought, you know, 10 over 10 different years. I don't know. So now they're doing, in essence, specific token identification to determine the ID, the acquisition date for that particular one. And now let's say they gave two. Well, now that's not just two that they purchased on one date. That was two maybe they purchased over a year or over a few months. So now they'd actually have a date range. So that actually has ability for them to be able to put the date range. And that is directly inputted to the date range acquisition date field on the form 8283. So it's basically just directly feeding into those documents. How it was acquired. So this is mined payment for service or investment. So there's still payment for service every once in a while. Primarily, it's more blockchain developers or more startup type employees are paid with the actual token. The date of the donation. So you can see here I had to put it all caps. This is the legal date the charity received the tokens. It is very frequent to have an acknowledgement from a charity that says, we actually received it on this date. Actually, it would say sent on this date, received on this date, sold on another date, all three different dates. Donors get very confused. So they have to be able to have the exact date that the charity received it. And then it's the cost basis per token. So this confuses donors too. Is the cost basis for the whole donation, or is it the cost basis per token? And so we've got to do it per token. So we basically do the formula math in there too, because otherwise they were getting confused about what the cost basis it was supposed to be. And then again, we'd have to redo the whole appraisal again. Can't make it up. This is so easy, right? Oh. And then did you make a second donation? So if they say yes to the same charity, then that's part of that additional fee process. So then we're able to have that one lower fee or higher fee for the first one, and then the lower fee for each additional one. Had one person do 14 of them to the same charity. So they were able to do all 14 right into this document. Then we have to basically do 14 different 8283s because those are all on different dates. And then the charity is signing off on the 8283 as having received the donation on a specific date. So then all that is sort of packaged. And then you can see there if it's completed, you know, exact information. I had one person misspelled their name. Can't make that up. So like, oh, can you just go in and fix it? It's like, this is all PDF. This is a huge pain. I'll basically have to do the, you know, sort of do it again. So next slide, I think really just goes to our past webinars that we've had. I think we are, I mean, how did we do this, Ryan? We did, you could probably tell, zero rehearsal of this. Hopefully you couldn't tell. Brian's like, I think it's gonna be about an hour, so sort of dead on. So these are our past ones. We've done again about 50 now. That's the library where you can go take a look at those. And there are multiple ones in here on crypto specifically. I'm trying to find them really, really fast, but you'd be able to see those. We got one in April of 2024. And then we've done at least 2 additional ones in the past that I think are still quite current, certainly not relative to the landscape, but certainly the process is very similar. Donor motivations would be very similar, and so on. So I'm going to take some time. You might see some questions coming in here. Ryan, that you might want to sort of call out too, but I don't see any upcoming ones that offer CLEs. Yeah, I was just gonna maybe mention that one. So it's super tough for us. These are all free, and these don't take 5 minutes to put together. And you already know this. So CLE, that's actually state bar for every individual state. So if you'd like to volunteer your time to take our submission and do it to 50 different states, give me a call. But we've never done that before, because then that goes to, CFP potential issues, insurance potential issues, CPA, and so on. So we've not done these specific webinars for any kind of CE. We do a ton of other sponsor specific, primarily for community foundations and others, where they are sponsoring CE specific. So at least 60, 70 of those, either in person or virtual presentations a year. Yeah, and Ryan, I think there was something else there.
There was a question of someone asking about any advice if they're considering setting up a supporting organization with crypto, which is really interesting. I would say make sure that you have everything submitted to set up the supporting organization and paid for by your donor. Because these crypto donors are very price sensitive, and someone who is very, very serious at today's prices may not be serious in 2 weeks if the price is 25% lower or 50% lower, or as we've seen, unfortunately, before, 99% lower.
Yes.
So
that's an actual case, by the way. What was it? A
yeah,
$40 million donation of crypto-ish, and went 99% loss of value within 2 weeks
after we took it. Yeah, 2 or 3 weeks. So just make sure that everything is in motion in a way that you haven't committed significant staff time and any out-of-pocket dollars for your charity. You really want the donor to be covering that and taking the lead, because that donation can go away very quickly in response to market conditions. Unfortunately, that's the reality. And can there be multiple donors? Yeah. For a supporting organization. Yeah, there's no problem with anything like that.
Yeah.
Let's see, do we think the change in administration might change the IRS valuation requirements? I doubt it. I wouldn't bet on that. That's a guess. Anything known.
And I'm going to be super bad here right at the end. This is recorded. I should shut up. I got to jump off. Ryan's got to jump off. And I hope everybody has appreciated this content generally. But if they do that, literally, I will go and I will buy a huge block of super esoteric tokens that I'll reverse engineer, that are trading for the highest volatility in a Southeast Asian exchange. That's called the Kimchi Premium. And I will get that block at a discount at 30 or 40%. I'll donate it to a charity and take the full deduction. I could game that in the millions if they change that. In the millions. Everybody keeps saying it is Bitcoin, 14,999 other tokens. And so when you talk about crypto, it is a much larger universe than people think, and a lot of different ways. You give me 4 or 5 subjective decisions that I can otherwise, as a donor, take that knob or lever and move it my way 5 different times. There's some delta. And so I'm not saying not to. I'm losing $150, and you get the point. It's like, this is not a gigantic revenue producer, but I think having done this for a long time, it is amazing what donors, A, try to get away with, number one, ignorantly or not, and 2, what you could actually do in the crypto space to be able to hyperinflate some of these types of tokens. But we'll leave that for another day. Ryan, great job as always. Again, I hope this is helpful for everyone else. We'll take the questions and answers from this one, scrape it, and include it for the one for Thursday, and we'll be able to post this next week. So again, hope it's helpful, and thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Bye.